Bago ako mag-PlayStation. Bago ako mag-PlayStation, tapos na natin to.
Bago
Yeah.
ako
Yeah, ikaw, GTS ako mag-PlayStation. Bago ako FIFA. Pag-usapan natin itong ating mahal na Pangulo, si Ferdinand Marcos Jr., otherwise known as PBBM. You are, I think, the first one who kind of said, if you really look at it for a moment, forget about his name and everything. He's quite a normal Filipino president, right? In many ways, he's quite a normal guy. Can you expound on that? And in what sense is that good or bad or potentially ugly or not? Talk about that.
Yeah,
Kasi ikaw na naman makulit ka sa ganyan eh.
so plug ko lang, one of my favorite actually publications undergrad pa lang binabasa ko na current history, binabasa ko yun as a debater. Ang matagal ko nang wish actually na ma-publish sa current history. Hindi ako maasa ma-publish sa foreign affairs kagaya mo, Richard, na masyadong matayog na pangarap
De,
para sa
vlogger
akin.
na ako, vlogger na ako.
Pang Richard Heydarian lang yung foreign affairs. Pero current history enough na for me yun. So happy ako na na-publish ako sa isa sa mga favorite kong journal.
I saw that, yeah.
Yung argument that I made there is an argument na actually napag-usapan na natin before na yung pagtakbo ni Bongbong was disruptive because he was tapping into Duterte, he was tapping into the memory of his father, which is of course a controversial and disruptive memory. Pero yung governance niya is very different from the way he ran. So si Duterte, actually, the way he ran, disruptive. The way he governed, disruptive. Si Bongbong, disruptive campaign, normal governance. And by normal,
Yeah.
I don't mean I'm super impressed. I just mean that he is not that different from his other unremarkable predecessors from, say, Corazon Aquino until Benigno Aquino III. And in fact, napaka-telling for me na it's not just us who are arriving, people like me who are arriving at this conclusion, but also people who hate who hate Noy Noy. I kind of like Noy Noy. Rigoberto Tiglao arrived at the conclusion that Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is Benigno Aquino, the third, the second version of Benigno
2.0.
Aquino.
Pinoy
Which is
2.0, yeah.
which is kind of cheeky and not entirely accurate, but there is a point there because he is normal in certain respects in a way that's very similar to Noy Noy. Yung parang trust the US, defend the Philippines in the South China Sea, trust your economic managers, don't put in disruptive economic managers there, diba? I mean, yung appointment of Eli Remolona, who's like the most responsible, most vanilla, but also most competent central banker you can find there. That's really a sign
Vanilla
that
is good. Vanilla is
be
the best,
disruptive. That he does not want to be disruptive at all, diba? And what's the most disruptive thing he's done? Maybe Maharlika, but as we said before, Maharlika is a bit of a nothing burger in the greater scheme of things. So yun lang yung argument
funds,
ko.
confidential funds.
For the son of one of the world's most kleptocratic dictators, and for someone who ran as a continuity candidate with a mass murderer, this guy's kind of normal.
Yeah. I want to, of course, transition to opposition because I want to end our discussion for this week here. And as you know, I'm kind of thinking, I think it's time to talk about the kind of a manifesto for opposition. So now that you have this another plot twist in Philippine politics, right? So the plot twist was actually not the return of Marcos's. The plot twist was the normality so far of Marcos Jr.'s administration, I would say. This is the more plot twist. But having said that, if things could shift this far in such a short time, it could also go the other way, right? It's a pendulum. So I always say there should be no room for complacency. I think many people are getting overexcited that Bongbong is much more open to people from other camps. Maraming so-called dilawan ay nandun na sa loob ng administration or they have some level of communications, etc.
Maraming dilawan na kinakausap na pailalim, di ba? Na hindi inilalantad, pero nandyan.
Yeah, and because there's like shared interest on West Philippine Sea. I know for a fact that people who were very invested in the arbitration award, etc. Some of them are quite happy about the direction of the country, even though but this is Marcos Jr. So it's kind of...
Ang daming dilawan na kausap dyan.
Yes.
Ang dami, di ba?
Correct.
Richard, di ba? Mga dilawan na baka mahihiya kung na-expose na kinakausap sila, pero bro, andyan sila, kinakausap sila.
Correct. Now, having said that, Lele, maybe this is where I want to end this episode because I mean, if anyone bothered to look at yung mga analysis natin, especially about domestic politics, and a lot of our international analysis is not just to say na marami tayong alam sa buhay, it's because we want to make being Filipino in the 21st century as cosmopolitan as it used to be during the Rizal's time, but also to draw best lessons from around the world, including democratic mobilization, including how to be the best version of opposition. If Leloy, in a moment of brazen presumptuousness, right? If you and I were to sit down and say, pag-usapan natin a kind of a mini manifesto for the Philippine opposition, having known everything, not because we're pro-opposition per se, but because we want a better democracy. You cannot have a real democracy if you don't have a real opposition, right? Second year of BBM, all the plot twists, all the global developments, all of these variables you and I have been taking in consideration. If there were to be a manifesto or kind of a skeletal manifesto, what do you think should be the elements there, Lelo? Sorry if I'm putting you on the under the spotlight, but I just think we have to more openly discuss these things, because at least si Magalang may manifesto na rin siya just the other day for, mayors for good governance. I think in fairness to Magalong, you can, say criticize his mayor's event because like, oy, yung mga ibang mayor dyan, hindi naman masyadong good governance. Or you could say, bakit wala yung mga Vico Soto types? Or, I mean, you could make an argument. But in fairness to the guy, he's at least in a Rosa Luxemburg way, right? You cannot wait for the revolution to happen. You have to create the conditions, including the failures that will pave the way for the real revolutions to come. So, may pagka Rosa Luxemburg level to that, di ba? So in that sense, what do you think should be the key elements for the opposition? What are the lessons we should learn from all of the plot twists and ups and downs, and also the opportunities that a normal BBM is presenting so far?
Wow, ang hirap nun.
Sorry talaga, nagso-apologize.
No, me, I'm gonna foreground economy, of course. Economy yung pinaka-importante talaga para sa opposition, and the opposition really needs to outline a new vision for what the economy should be.
Yes.
Ang pinakamalaki ko talagang problema sa Lenny campaign is essentially ang sabi lang, hindi ko talaga makalimutan to, yung ad ni Lenny where she goes, ang economic program ko, pag malinis ang gobyerno, papasok ang investment.
Right.
That's so passive. Yeah. So what essentially she's saying is, dahil mabait ako, dahil malinis ako, darating yung investors. That's not how you encourage investors. Just, mabait ako, dumating kayo. That's essentially what she's saying. Mabait
China, Vietnam, corruption. Like, yeah. It doesn't work that way, yeah.
How do you attract investors? Well, I suggest really people, basahin nyo talaga yung mga columns ni Professor Raul Fabella.
Right. Business World ba to? Business Mirror?
Business World.
Yeah.
Medyo mahirap basahin si Sir Raul dahil not only is he an economist and medyo technical yung economics, he's also a literary man. So it's like dense economic theory pero may literary allusions and may literary flair. So you have to know your literature and you have to know your economics. But it's very rewarding reading Fabella. So because his ideas are ideas that are not commonly accepted. So for example, Fabella has been tracing recently, just a column sa yesterday, binakread ko lang lahat ng Fabella columns eh. He's been tracing yung export growth ng Vietnam. And I said, like, very clear nga talaga na may export growth yung Vietnam dahil naglalakad ako dito sa street namin, sa main street namin, and there's a showroom for VinFast. There's Vietnamese cars on our main street. I'm on 7th Street.
Which did fantastic IPO the other week. Fantastic IPO, like wow, big time.
Yeah. And who's writing about that in the Philippines? Why Vietnam has become export oriented? Nobody, except for Fabella. Yeah. And Fabella's obsession is of course weakening the currency. Weakening the currency and sending a market signal that we will be open for exporters. Now, what Fabella's so this is just one idea of a really out of the box idea. Ang idea ni Fabella is a column called "Who's Afraid of a Weak Peso." Is that the way what you do is you not only weaken the peso, you weaken it substantially dahil may import bias, and you weaken it in a sustained fashion. Because if it's not sustained, sasabihin lang ng investors, ay hindi naman seryoso yung Pilipinas about encouraging exports eh. 2 months lang naman magiging weak yung peso. we can't work with just 2 months of the peso being weak if the central bank is
Yeah.
sending a message that it's going to defend it in the long run. So kailangan sustain parang Vietnam, and and we've never had that, di ba? And if you look at yung Vietnam, ang laki ng trade surplus nila ever since, I was just looking at it, ang laki ng trade surplus nila ever since nag-depreciate. And kaya pa eh. Kasi a lot of people were saying, di ba, the era of, depreciations to boost exports are over, di ba? Over na yan. Ginawa yan ng Korea at ng Taiwan noong 80s. Hindi na ganun yung mundo ngayon. Wala nang
Yeah.
export-oriented industrialization ngayon. Lalo na since service sector yung Pilipinas. Tingnan mo yung Vietnam, it just did it in the last 10 years. Diba? May VinFast ka ng, may
Yeah.
VinFast ka ng inig. Kaya pa.
Yeah.
Hindi pa tayo napag-iwanan in that sense.
At oligarch yung gumawa nun. I mean, the guy behind is a real estate magnate.
Yung Vin, I was talking to a Vietnamese specialist. Yung Vin daw is parang, I guess, the closest analog is they're just like the biggest company in Vietnam. So parang SM siguro na.
Yeah,
Parang
exactly.
SM
They're the
siguro.
SM Ayalas of our country, and yet none of our Ayalas or SMs have created anything close to what we see, right? I mean, some of our oligarchs are, I mean, maybe Ayalas should not be in the same category, to be fair to them, but let's just talk about billionaires, right? Big businesses, conglomerates. None of them invested in this manufacturing. And I remember I actually wrote something about VinFast just a few months ago when I was in Vietnam, how many were skeptical about this, it's not doing well. But look at it, they persisted. They opened that showroom na gorgeous, posh next to your place. They did an IPO. The guy jumped into top 40 richest men in the world. Out of nowhere. And now they're going to be an EV powerhouse. No? And you know who told me about this? Germans kept on telling me how VinFast is an interesting one. Vietnamese themselves, they want Tesla, just to be clear. But the Germans who are watching Vietnam are very impressed because they're my contact, my friends in Vietnam, a lot of them. And they know their stuff, the German, because I think VinFast also has plans not too far from where BMWs of this world are being made, no? In Bavaria, etc.
Speaking of pride, Richard, there was a previous episode, pinag-usapan natin, pride seeing Filipinos abroad. We should also invest in the kind of pride you feel when you're walking around the
Yes.
United States and you see a Filipino product.
Car,
You're walking
exactly,
around Japan,
yeah.
you see a Filipino car. Diba? Parang may
Yeah.
pride din dun eh. And we have actually denied ourselves that pride. I would say since the 1950s. We've denied ourselves that pride. And we deserve it, man. We fucking deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, hindi naman pwedeng ang Tanduay, Ginebra, yung mga ganyan lang, di ba?
Oh,
Sure, we can do better than that.
I'm proud of, having said that, napaproud, konti lang yan, pero I'm proud of these guys.
Okay, I love
Don
Jollibee. Okay, I'll go with the Jollibee one.
Nakaka-proud.
Ako
But we
Jollibee
deserve-
ako, bro. Sorry.
We deserve to be proud of our fucking tradables.
Yes.
Really, I'm serious.
Yeah. Ako Jollibee guy ako. So maybe sa'yo yung Tanduay and Ginebra, whatever. San Miguel. I'm just saying we can do this, and I'm just shocked by the lack of prioritization. But of course, in Vietnam, we know. So ganito. So essentially, the first thing you're saying is that we should tone down. I mean, it's important to be clean and not corrupt, but we should not forget the more important thing, which is proactive industrial and trade policy, right? Let's talk industrial policy, because there in the United States, the cradle of new liberalism, openly industrial policy is the language of the Biden administration, right?
And they're
Green New
using that
Deal.
word, bro.
Yeah,
They're using that word.
industrial policy is the new cool. Exactly. And not only in China, not only in Vietnam, in the United States, the Biden administration, Jake Sullivan keeps on talking about it. Right and left, right and left. All of these fights with China are over. So I'm shocked na ang Pilipinas na nakakopyas doon sa neoliberalismo ng Amerikano, hindi humabol. And in fact, Lele, just to tell you, our episodes about how technocrats ruined the Philippines is one of our best doing episodes, actually. Ang dami na to because it's so outside the box. Ayaw nga, no? Hindi lang mga trapos ang pwedeng sisisiin, di ba? It's actually the technocrats who run the day-to-day business. It's not like Digong was doing anything about our trade industrial policy. Or ERAP. Maybe Arroyo a bit, but I doubt most of our presidents, right? Even Marcos, I doubt. Marcos Sr., of course, including. So I like this. Yes. So the first one is, don't over-moralize economics. Don't moralize economics.
May tanong ako sa'yo, but let me just add to that. Tingnan mo yung performance si Bongbong economically this year. What he's done is he's tried to tame inflation via a central bank and a central bank governor that's quite aggressive in terms of rates. And at the same time, bumagal yung economic growth as a result of that. Pero the main reason bakit bumagal yung economic growth, according to many economists, is bumaba ang government spending. Hindi gumagalaw. That is something that Finance Secretary, that Benjamin Diokno used to call criminally underspending. But he wasn't applying that criticism to Marcos. He was applying that criticism to Noynoy Aquino. So if you look at if you look at yung stumble ni Marcos economically ngayon, it looks like an Aquino stumble. It actually does look like an Aquino stumble. So if Marcos is behaving like Noynoy economically, the opposition should not behave
Tiglaw
like
nga.
Noynoy economically
Tiglaw nga.
anymore. And ang dilawan nga ng economic moves eh. So hindi na pwedeng dilawan. Something
But
more aggressive.
I'll push back against that, Leloy, because my argument there was, grabe naman yung na-inherit na sa natin kay Digong. Grabe yung debt expansion, grabe yung sabog na economy na legacy natin. So I think what Marcos has been trying to do in his first year, so, yes, there's the Intel Fund, Confidential Fund, Maharlika Fund, all those problematic funds, sure. But I think overall he wanted a signal that is going to be much more macro-prudential. So I think this is a macro-prudential signaling.
Macro-prudential, noy-noy.
Well, exactly. So tiglaw nga. Sabi nila
Noy.
tiglaw, Aquino 2.0, right? In the same way that Pinoy was correcting the signaling problem from Arroyo, it looks like Marcos is doing the same thing to Duterte. That's my sense, in terms of policy signaling game that they're playing. But you're absolutely right. They cannot do this forever. Although some of our friends from the opposition have all ways of parsing, out the... No, but, on the surface, Philippines and India will be the two fastest growing major economies of Asia, which is great. But at the same time, of course, let's not forget they had the worst recession also in 2020 in Asia. So it kind of just cancels out. But clearly, Marcos Jr. is not doing catastrophically out of the curve, right? So in that sense, his macroeconomics and his record in macroeconomics is more normal, as you correctly pointed out.
Oh, normal, which is not bad, di ba? I mean, magaling naman ang macroeconomic managers
Not
natin
bad,
eh.
but not great, right? Which is why you're saying we need aggressive,
we can be
proactive.
great. Yeah, we can be great.
So that's
We can be
one.
great.
Last one. Na parang, let's not over obsess about. Let's watch it out, sure, but let's not over obsess about Maharlika, Intel, Confidential Fund. Those are important, but the even bigger issue there is getting industrial and trade policy right so that we can become the next Vietnam, right? I hate saying that because we were supposed to be way ahead of Vietnam for all reasons. But the reality now is Vietnam is getting all of the top quality investments. Samsung, Apple, now they have their own brand of cars. Who knows what's next, right? So we need to be part of a Vietnam plus one or Taiwan plus one strategy, whereby some of the investments in this country also moves to the Philippines because those countries also have their problems. Taiwan could be invaded. Vietnam is increasingly corrupt and has political crisis itself, and has problems with China. So that's one thing, and I think I completely agree with you, and I think I'll be very confident if there were a manifesto with that, I'm going to sign it 100% because this is my stance also for a very long time. So, less moralizing, more strategizing.
Ikaw. So,
Number
ikaw
two,
naman,
number two,
priority?
coalition building rather than cancel culture.
Yun.
Boom, di ba? First is less moralizing, more strategizing, economically speaking. Second, less cancel culture, more coalition building. That will be my item number 2 in a manifesto for the opposition. So what I think Magalong doing is interesting. Again, I'm not here endorsing the guy, but I think the fact that he said, wait, bago tayo humusga ng etong mayor ay medyo kurakot, let's build muna a movement. Let's try to work with different people from Luzon to Mindanao, literally, no? And from there, let's see where we go, no? Kasi kung tipong, ay, ito medyo trapo, ito semi-trapo. I mean, yung meron kang gradation systems, hindi talaga magte-take off yan. Especially when you're coming from a position of weakness, which is where the progressive opposition is in the Philippines. In short, I mean, if they say beggars cannot choose, I would say opposition cannot be choosy also. In a sense that have to build coalition, but obviously you have to have a negative list. I mean, sinong talagang dapat you don't work with, right? Yung mga talagang no way. But there are a lot of gray areas that we have to work. And for me, sana the coalition building doesn't start 2 months before declaration of presidential candidates. It starts 2, 3, 4 years before that happening. I hope at one day we'll have things that even countries like Argentina have, which is some sort of primary, right? Hindi lang sa US. But yung mga ibang third world country, may primaries na rin sila. Turkey also had the primary before their opposition candidate was chosen against Erdogan, and it came very close, 48 to 50, 49 almost to 51%, right? So that helps with coalition building. It's difficult, but it's necessary. Ikaw, what do you say about the coalition building? Kasi, di ba, the joke is, you get 2 Filipinos, you get 3 organizations out of them, yung something like that.
I'd say before I comment on that, nakikita nyo dun sa na-outline natin that the ideas are actually already there. It's not as if ini-invento natin to. The ideas and the inspirations are already there. So, I mean, yun sa point 1 ko, sabi ko, basahin nyo si Professor Raul Favela. Sabi mo, tignan nyo si Magalong. There are people we can listen to, and these are people who are not necessarily affiliated with Marcos or the Dilawans, diba? Actually, mga independent thinkers to,
Exactly. May sariling,
we should draw from their energy kasi yung kanilang sorry, nagbulo na ako.
Heterodox.
Heterodox thinking
Yeah.
is something that we can take inspiration from. So yeah, and I completely agree. We've talked about cancel culture, political cancel culture here a lot, di ba? Ito yung mga taong, for example, na ikaw yung nagsabi sa akin ito, di ba? Hanggang ngayon may mga taong hindi pa rin pinapatawad si Grace po for running against
Oh yeah,
running
the
against
graceful hate is
oh, yung
hanggang
mga ganyan
ngayon,
pa.
yeah, hanggang ngayon, yeah.
Di ba? I-give up nyo na yan. Kasi meron naman, I think, like, for example, I think there are quote-unquote mainstream politicians or some people would even say trapo politicians na you can actually work with on occasion and kind of create make them part of a new opposition discourse kahit hindi sila necessarily opposition.
Yeah.
Grace can be part of that. The Be Nice, for example.
Idol
somebody
mo,
like
si
Rafi.
Idol Rafi. Oh.
Rafi, yung ganyan, di ba? Yung ganyan
Yeah.
na parang, okay, maybe hindi sila opposition. Maybe you're not working with them all the time. But you coordinate with them, you work with them, and you talk to their supporters. I think that's definitely part of the vision that you're sketching here.
And the third element for me, more compassion, less judgment. I think this is very important. This is very important. By the way, bro, I didn't prepare any of this. It's just coming naturally, right? It's not like I'm reading it. You could say it's just compassion,
Sige,
no judgment.
May five ako. May five ako after that.
Oh,
But
don't worry.
Go ahead.
3 pa lang tayo. So we need one more para maging 5 yan. No, we need a 5-point agenda for
Ano ba tayo ngayon? Ano ba tayo? Aggressive new aggressive
Yeah.
industrial policy.
more coalition building than
coalition
cancel
building.
culture. And then third for
And
me,
then-
more compassion than judgment
Okay.
vis-a-vis
Okay.
voters.
Okay.
Because
Sige.
ang dami ko nakita na they're voting for the BBMs or Dutertes of the world just because nabastusan sila by some supposed Dilawan or Pinklawan or whatever like that. And when you show some level of openness and understanding and all, it can go a long way, not only in terms of politics but also in terms of human relations and in terms of humility and learning, right? So we have to learn to, and I know this is gonna sound strange coming from me, but we have to learn to listen more than talking at people. And then, like, of course, I'm telling that to myself, but at least no one can question my compassion because anyone who knows me, they know I never judge, especially when it comes to our less privileged na kababayan who don't have the education you and I have had.
Kahit even if we get super yabang at times, kahit yung kayabangan natin galing dito sa puso.
Exactly. Gilas para sa Pilipinas. Okay, gilas. Purong puso. Number 4, ano bro? Go for it.
Reality. Belief in reality. Belief in reality. And,
What's a reality check or like,
Belief in reality.
possibilities?
Meaning kung may conspiracy theories yung kabila, it is our obligation to not reproduce.
Google Trends in the house. Yeah.
Need to be anchored in reality. So
self-awareness. Self-awareness. Yes.
Self-awareness. Oh, self-awareness.
Oh.
Yeah. Self-awareness. Don't deceive yourself, di ba? So yung classic Gramscian prescription of pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. Kasi
Yeah, exactly.
yung utak mo is very clear na when things don't go your way, kaya mong tanggapin.
Cold mind,
Pero yung
warm heart.
lumalatan pa rin. Oh.
Yeah.
So yun, that's my
And what would be our number 5 from all of the discussions we have had? Well, for me, which is I think what we're already doing, right? There are certain issues where we should put partisanship completely aside. There should be certain areas where we should be completely post-partisan. So if BBM is doing the right thing on the West Philippine Sea, let's support him. He's our president. I know he's BBM. You didn't like him. I don't know, whatever. But there are certain issues where we have to put partisanship aside and put the national interest forward. Because which is kind of related to what you were saying around a while ago, sa self-awareness, in echo chamber. So it's related to number 3 and 4. But for me, I think we have to be very clear about it, that there are certain areas where we have to be bipartisan, if I can put it that way. Although wala naman talagang 2 parties sa Philippines. I think that's very important. National interest first. I know this kind of sounds weird, parang ilustrado era, but it is true. Otherwise, Leloy, kakainin tayo ng buhay ng ibang bansa because that's the rhetoric. Nationalist rhetoric in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in India, not only developed countries. kakahinda ng buhay kung wala tayong idea ng national interest. And with the idea of post-partisanship, that it also should, there should be also this sense of audacity and self-confidence. I think it's very, very important. Audacity to learn from the best practices around the world. So essentially, I'm promoting our podcast, right? Nexus. We need an opposition which is learning all around the world while being nationalistic, right? Grounded in Philippine national interest, but willing to pick up the best practices from all around the world. Yep, I think we completed 5-point agenda just spontaneously,
Yeah.
just like that.
Gusto ko lang sabihin, Richard, parang in terms of post-partisanship also, it's not just that we can support Marcos on certain things like China, we can actually also support parts of his government na magaling.
Yes.
Kasi alam mo, maraming magaling dyan. We forget, we tend to focus so much on things like, siya pa rin yung Secretary of Agriculture dahil wala siyang mahanap na competent. But don't forget, the DNR Secretary is Tony Yulo Loizaga, di ba?
Right.
Ang alam ko, Lenny supporter yan, di ba? Na pristine ng academic reputation and pristine also ang honesty.
Yeah.
There's Popo Lutilla in energy who's just been one of our great technocrats and just like a standout guy who's very capacious in his interests and just like one of the most intelligent government officials you'll ever meet, di ba?
Correct.
So actually, and then sabi mo, Richard, the other week, di ba, si Babe Singson pwede pumasok. The Babe Singson, one of the favorite cabinet officials of Benigno
Water
Aquino
Secretary.
III and one of our great cabinet officials from the Aquino regime who is now helping the Marcos administration on issues of flooding and damming, right? And who might come back at one point as a member of government. If Babe Singson comes back, as an opposition, you should be grateful. You shouldn't condemn him. For joining the Marcos administration. You should be grateful that one of our great secretaries from the Aquino period is back.
Wow, on that very heartening note, I would say. I love it. I think these are a lot of unsung heroes, fantastic people there. And I think if you really ask them, Lele, they'll tell you, para sa bayan. I know people find it sarcastic, para sa bayan, like joke na lang, sige na nga. But I think deep inside, a lot of these people are doing this because they have a sense of national interest. At naawa sila sa ating mga kababayan na iba who have been abandoned and have not been taken care of. So they're there for those Filipino people. They're not there for BBM. They're not there for Lenny. They're not there for you and me. They're there for the Filipino people. And that's also why you and I are doing what we're doing. Maraming salamat, Lele. It has been a pleasure and honor to have this whole series of conversation. I don't know, I think more than 25 episodes na tayo so far. So hopefully this is just the beginning of a longer conversation, God willing. Lele, take care of yourself. My Sabbath has started, so I'm gonna take a little bit of detox from
your Sabbath. Enjoy. I'm so glad you're doing that. Maraming salamat.
God bless.
It's been so fun.
Talk
Bye-bye.
to you soon.
Sige.
Para ingat
Okay,
ka.
bro. Yeah. Jiu-Jitsu now. Ang ganda nung last episode din. I didn't realize that we come up with the platform.
Sobrang spontaneous, no? Yeah, exactly.
Spontaneous platform. Sige. Okay.
Go, bro. Ingat. Thank you so much, guys. Maraming salamat. I really, really appreciate it. Ayan. Si paring Leloy Cloudy, because for all of the Coops comments and all of that, hindi yan nakikita niya talaga ang pakinamin talaga yung ating bayan. And people like him, 21st century illustrados, like him, they give me a lot of hope about the direction of our country. They give me a lot of good people are inside and not getting the kind of attention that they should get. So outside the box kasi mag-isip si Leloy, and he's never scared to go against the grain, no? And it's that intellectual courage that always inspired me and keeps us on an even keel. So maraming salamat. Thank you very much sa lahat ng mga followers natin dyan sa YouTube, among others listening to us. Si Alpha, sabi na, I hope Mayor Magalong and his allies can produce a better presidential bet in 2028. Yes, that's I think what they're doing. Si Robin Ahan Santos, I hope that's okay, correctly joining us from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Wassalamualaikum. Thank you very much for joining us. Ayan, mag-update kayo sa akin about Neymar and Al Ittihad and all of that Saudi Football League. Pag-usapan natin next time. Thank you very much sa mga kasama natin sa YouTube. Have a good week.